I always thought peace was a luxury, something that only appeared in insurance commercials or in the hazy afternoons we imagine when we're too exhausted with real life. That was until I met Malcolm. And then I realized, peace is sometimes just two smiles accidentally finding each other, in the right place at the right time. My name is Sunny. I'm a sophomore majoring in communications at a public university in the eastern United States, a place of old oak trees where autumn dyes every path a burnt yellow. I live in a dorm, a double room with a window overlooking the central lawn where students often lie reading, laughing, or simply existing together. The day I met Malcolm was a Monday morning. The air was chilly, and the sunlight was as thin as fragile glass. I arrived at the lecture hall 3 minutes late, a bad habit, and picked a random empty spot in the middle row. I was still rummaging through my backpack for my laptop when someone sat down next to me. "Hey, sorry, is this seat taken?" His voice was deep, slightly husky, the kind of voice that makes you look up even when you're busy. I turned. Malcolm. I don't have a more accurate word for it other than saying he looked very settled. Dark brown hair neatly cut, bright skin, a smile that wasn't too wide but warm enough. He wore a gray hoodie, dark blue jeans, and held a paper coffee cup with the logo of the shop near the campus gate. "No, go ahead," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart had just skipped a beat. We sat next to each other throughout that class. Malcolm took notes carefully, his handwriting neat and orderly. I pretended to focus, but in reality, I kept being pulled toward him. By the scent of coffee, by the warmth of his arm occasionally brushing mine, by a strange sense of familiarity as if I had known him before. At the end of the session, just as the professor finished, Malcolm turned to me. "Sunny, right? I saw your name on the attendance sheet." I smiled. "Yeah, you're Malcolm." He nodded, his smile curving up. "You want to grab coffee? I mean, another one." I didn't say no. The beginning of us. The small coffee shop sat right on the street corner opposite the library. We sat by the window where the slanted light highlighted every small movement on Malcolm's face. He told me he was a psychology major, a junior, who had transferred from California because he wanted a change of scenery. I told him I grew up in New Jersey, loved to write, and hated waking up early. The conversation flowed so effortlessly that I didn't realize I was opening up. Malcolm had a way of listening that made you feel safe. Attentive eyes, slight nods, no interruptions. When I laughed, he laughed too. When I hesitated, he waited. I don't know when it happened, but there was a moment, a very brief one, when our eyes held each other longer than usual. No one said a word. But in that moment, I knew something was beginning. In the days that followed, Malcolm became a part of my routine. We sat together in class, had lunch together at the cafeteria, studied in groups on the third floor of the library. One Friday afternoon, as the campus began to empty, we sat on the steps in front of the social sciences building. The weather turned cold quickly, the wind carrying the scent of dry leaves. "Sunny," Malcolm said, his voice slowing down. "Can I ask you something?" I looked at him. "Sure." He took a breath, as if weighing every word. You ever feel like you're smiling on the outside, but still looking for a place to rest inside? That question touched me deeper than I expected. "Every day," I replied honestly. Malcolm smiled. Gently. Truly. "Me too." We sat in silence for a long time. Not uncomfortable. Not empty. Just two people, two smiles, sharing a small pocket of peace in a vast world. That night, back in my room, I lay in bed thinking about Malcolm, about his voice, his gaze, that question. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I didn't know yet that the peace I had just touched would soon be tested, that longing would come hand in hand with hurt. But in that moment, in the middle of the semester, in the middle of autumn, I believed I had found a place to start. The first kiss and the first shadow. After that afternoon, Malcolm was no longer just the guy sitting next to me in class. He wove himself into my life so slowly that I didn't even realize when I had become accustomed to his presence. We started having shared habits. Tacos from the food truck on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Studying at the library until 10 p.m. on Wednesdays, then walking back together, talking aimlessly about everything. From difficult professors and bad Netflix movies to high school memories we rarely told others. Malcolm was a questioner, but not the kind who asks to fill the void. He asked because he genuinely wanted to understand me. "You always overthink like this?" he said one night, as I was struggling with an upcoming presentation. I sighed. "It's kind of my thing." Malcolm chuckled softly. "Must be exhausting." "Yeah," I replied, then looked at him. "But somehow, not when I'm with you." The words left my mouth faster than I could think. I waited for awkwardness, or at least a polite smile. But Malcolm just looked at me, his gaze softening. "I'm glad," he said. We didn't mention it again, but it was there, hanging between us like a thin, invisible thread, yet strong enough to pull us closer. One weekend evening, Malcolm invited me to his off-campus apartment. It was small, just one bedroom with simple furniture. The walls were decorated with photos of California landscapes, the ocean, highways, vibrant orange sunsets. "You miss it?" I asked, standing before a photo. Malcolm nodded. "Sometimes, but I needed space. From my family. From expectations." He handed me a beer and sat on the sofa opposite me. The warm yellow light made the space feel softer, quieter. "Are you out?" he asked very softly. I hesitated. "To some people. Not all." Malcolm nodded, as if he had already guessed. "Same." The atmosphere grew heavy. Not burdened, but deep enough for me to feel my own heartbeat. I looked at Malcolm, and this time our eyes didn't pull away. I don't remember who leaned in first. I only remember that when the distance between us vanished, I thought. So, I wasn't imagining it. The first kiss was very light, almost tentative. His lips touched mine, warm and slow, as if asking for permission. I responded, my hand resting on his shoulder, feeling a slight tremor. I couldn't tell if it was his or mine. When we pulled apart, Malcolm rested his forehead against mine. "Is this okay?" he asked. I smiled, my breath still hitched. "More than okay." That night, we didn't go any further. We just sat together watching a half-finished movie, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand. But that very intimacy, unhurried, unpossessive, made me feel incredibly safe. The test of distance. Since that kiss, everything changed, yet nothing did. We still studied together, laughed together. But now there were stolen touches under the desk. Midnight texts just to say, "Are you awake?" Hugs that lasted longer than necessary when no one was around. But as the emotions grew, I began to notice Malcolm's silences. There were days when he became distant. Slow text replies, fewer smiles. When I asked, he'd just say, "Just tired." I wanted to believe that. But my intuition, the thing I hated because it was right so often, began to whisper. One rainy afternoon, we sat in Malcolm's car, parked near the library. Raindrops drummed against the windshield, creating long streaks. "Sunny," Malcolm said, looking straight ahead. "What are we doing?" The question made my heart tighten. "We're us," I replied, half joking. Malcolm turned to look at me. His eyes weren't just gentle anymore. There was worry and fear. "I like you," he said. "A lot. But I'm scared I don't know how to hold on to something good without breaking it." I was silent. Then I reached out and took his hand. "Maybe," I said slowly, "we don't have to hold so tight." Malcolm looked down at our hands. He smiled faintly. In that moment, I believed that as long as we kept smiling at each other, kept choosing each other every day, this place of peace wouldn't disappear. I didn't know that the first real challenge was very close, and it would force us to face our deepest fears. 3,000 miles. The challenge didn't come loudly. It didn't knock or give a warning. It appeared quietly, like a small crack on glass. Hard to notice at first, but once seen, impossible to ignore. It all started with an email. Malcolm received an acceptance for a spring research internship at a psychology center in San Francisco. A big opportunity. A real step forward for his career. I knew it the moment I saw his eyes light up while reading the email on his phone. "That's amazing," I said, and I wasn't lying. "I'm proud of you." Malcolm smiled, but it wasn't whole. It's 3 months, he said. Across the country. 3 months. San Francisco. More than 3,000 miles away. Oh, I replied a beat late. When do you leave? End of January. We sat in my room, the window cracked open. The cold wind seeped in, bringing the scent of winter. That night, after Malcolm left, I lay alone in bed. The ceiling was stark white. My phone sat silent beside me. I thought about distance, about time, about how we were too new to make promises, but too deep to pretend we didn't care. In the following weeks, Malcolm became busier. He had to prepare documents, meet supervisors, arrange housing. I understood. I really did. But understanding didn't make the hollow feeling go away. There were lunches where I sat alone in the cafeteria, looking at the empty seat across from me, telling myself not to be selfish, that this was Malcolm's future, that loving someone is also learning how to let them go. But I wasn't good at it. One evening, as we were walking back after class, I stopped in the middle of the path lined with bare trees. Are you pulling away? I asked directly. Malcolm stopped too. He looked at me surprised. What? No. It feels like it, I said. Like you're already leaving. Malcolm exhaled, hands shoved into his coat pockets. I'm trying to prepare myself. I don't want this to hurt more than it has to. That stung. So you're protecting yourself, I said, by distancing from me. That's not fair, he replied, his voice tightening. Then what is fair? I asked. Pretending this doesn't matter? Malcolm was silent for a long time. Then he said, so softly I almost couldn't hear him, I don't know how to do long distance. I don't know if I'm strong enough. For the first time I saw Malcolm, the one who was always calm, always gentle, look truly fragile. I stepped closer, placing my hand on his chest, where his heart was beating fast. You don't have to know everything, I said. Neither do I. We hugged under the barren trees. But that embrace wasn't just warm anymore. Carried anxiety, and the fear of loss. Departure. The day of Malcolm's departure arrived faster than I wanted. We didn't do anything special on the last day. Just dinner, a walk, and then back to his apartment. That night, we lay next to each other in bed, lights off, with only the dim city glow filtering in. Promise me something, Malcolm said. Anything. Don't disappear, he whispered. I turned to look at him in the dark. I won't, if you don't. Malcolm nodded. I kissed him, longer this time, as if wanting to etch this feeling into my memory. We loved each other that night. Slowly, gently, unhurriedly. Not out of lust, but out of the need to be close for just a little longer before the distance stepped in. The next morning, I saw him off at the airport. We stood before the security gate, surrounded by loudspeaker announcements and rushed goodbyes. I'll call you, he said. I know. He pulled me into a tight hug. When he let go, his eyes were rimmed with red. Smile for me, Sonny, he said. So I remember what home looks like. I smiled, though my throat felt tight. You too. As Malcolm turned away, I stood there for a long time. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, as if a part of my peace had been packed up and carried away. I didn't know that distance wouldn't just test our love. It would force us to face ourselves, and choose whether those two smiles were strong enough to find the same place of peace again. The echo of silence. 3 time zones. That number sounded harmless at first. But after just a week, I understood how heavy it could be. Malcolm called me on his first night in San Francisco. I had just finished brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed, when my phone vibrated. Hey! His voice came through the speaker, tired but familiar. Hey! I replied, climbing into bed. You made it. Yeah, the city's loud, and beautiful, and overwhelming. I smiled, imagining Malcolm standing somewhere among the hills, city lights reflecting in his eyes. We talked for nearly an hour, about his new room, his colleagues, how he got lost because Google Maps didn't account for San Francisco's steepness. But when the call ended, I looked at the dark ceiling and felt the absence acutely. No steady breathing beside me. No familiar words. Only silence. In the beginning, we tried to keep a rhythm. My morning texts arrived while Malcolm was asleep. His goodnight texts arrived while I was in a lecture. We left voice notes, scattered fragments of voices pieced together into a day. But then, exhaustion crept in. Malcolm was busy, truly busy. The research work swept him away, internships ran long, meetings happened unexpectedly. I understood. I told myself I understood. But every time I saw a sorry, long day text instead of a call, my heart sank. One evening, after finishing my studies, I sat alone on the central lawn. The campus was the same. Yellow lights, distant laughter, couples walking hand in hand. I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos. Malcolm laughing in the coffee shop, Malcolm asleep at his desk, Malcolm looking at me with that gaze that made me believe I was the place he wanted to return to. I typed a message, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I sent. Do you still feel close to me? 30 minutes later, Malcolm replied, Of course I do. I'm just trying to survive here. That answer wasn't wrong. But it wasn't enough. Our first real fight happened on a Friday night. I had waited all day to talk to him. Malcolm promised to call. But by nearly midnight, the phone was still silent. When he finally called back, I couldn't hide the disappointment in my voice. I waited, I said. I know, Malcolm replied, sighing. I lost track of time. You always do lately. Silence. Then Malcolm said, his voice tense. This isn't easy for me either, Sonny. I didn't say it was, I countered. I just feel like I'm doing this alone. Those words fell between us, heavy. That's not fair, Malcolm said. I'm here, aren't I? Are you? I asked, surprised by how sharp my own voice was. The call didn't end well. No sweet goodbyes. I lay still, heart racing, mind spinning with thoughts I didn't want to have. Maybe Malcolm will realize he's more comfortable not having to try anymore. Maybe I'm just a part of the past that's easy to let go. In the days that followed, we talked less. Not because we didn't care, but because we were both afraid of saying the wrong thing. I hated that feeling. The guardedness between two people who used to be so natural with each other. One Sunday afternoon, I received a small package. No sender name. Inside was a gray hoodie, the one Malcolm used to wear, and a neatly folded piece of paper. For when you need something that feels like me. I pressed the hoodie to my face and inhaled deeply. The familiar scent made my eyes sting. I called Malcolm immediately. I got it, I said, my voice trembling. I figured you might need it, he replied, more gently than I had heard in days. We were silent for a moment. Then Malcolm said, I'm sorry I've been distant. I didn't realize how much I was shutting you out. I swallowed hard. I'm scared, I admitted, that by the time you come back, we won't fit anymore. Malcolm sighed. I don't want to lose you, Sonny. I just need to learn how to hold on from far away. I closed my eyes, gripping the hoodie. Then let's learn. Even if we mess up. That night, we didn't solve everything. But we laughed, told each other trivial stories, recalled memories on campus. And in that moment, the distance seemed to shorten, not geographically, but emotionally. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything would be easy from then on. But for the first time in weeks, I slept without feeling empty. Two smiles, one in the east, one on the west coast, were still trying to find their way back to the same place of peace. The return. The time that followed wasn't exactly easier, but it was more real. Malcolm and I began to learn how to love each other across the distance. Not ideally, not like a romantic movie, but clumsily and often tiredly. We scheduled video calls twice a week. We couldn't always talk for long, but at least there was an appointment. We listened to each other more, interrupted less, defended less. Perhaps the distance forced us to speak more clearly about what we were feeling, what we needed, what we feared. But not every day was like that. There were days when I felt like the only one keeping the fire alive. There were nights I turned off my phone early because I didn't have the energy to wait for a text that might not come. I started writing, something I always did when emotions felt too full. I wrote about Malcolm, about his smile, and I wrote about the fear that maybe one day I would no longer be his home. I didn't send those lines to Malcolm, but maybe he felt it. At the end of March, Malcolm called me early one morning. "I'm coming back," he said without preamble.
Sæt bolt oprejt.
"What?" "For spring break. Just a week." I couldn't wait anymore. My heart beat so hard I had to press my hand to my chest. "Are you serious?" "I already booked the flight." I laughed. A wide, genuine laugh that I hadn't felt in a long time. "I miss you," I said, nearly in tears. "I miss you too," Malcolm replied. "More than I thought possible." Spring break. The week leading up to it passed agonizingly slowly. I cleaned my room, washed the sheets, bought the coffee Malcolm liked. I was anxious. Would it be awkward to see each other again? Would the distance have left an invisible scar? The day Malcolm landed, I stood in the airport arrivals hall, my heart racing. When I saw him walk out, black jacket, familiar backpack, all thoughts vanished. We said nothing. Malcolm pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. I buried my face in his neck, the familiar scent washing over me like a wave. "Hi," he said, his voice shaking slightly.
Raplia.
We went straight to his apartment. No lights, not much talking, just kissing long, deep, as if making up for every day apart. But in that moment, I realized something else. Malcolm wasn't just gentle anymore. There was a suppressed longing, a fear of loss that made every touch feel more real. I felt him whole, present, no longer divided by a screen or a time zone. That night, after everything settled, we lay side by side, hands interlaced. "I was afraid," Malcolm said, looking at the ceiling, "that coming back would make leaving harder." I turned to him. "Does it?" Malcolm was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, the smile I had missed so achingly. "Yes, but it also reminds me why I'm holding on." The week passed faster than I wanted. We lived as if there were no tomorrow, breakfast together, walks around campus, sitting on the old steps where it all began. The day Malcolm had to leave again, I didn't feel that same emptiness as before. It was still sad, still hurt, but there was something else, a fragile but real faith. Before going through security, Malcolm turned back and smiled at me. "Two smiles," he said. "Same place. We're just taking turns holding it." I nodded, smiling back. And this time I believed him, choosing each other. After Malcolm returned to San Francisco, things weren't as sharp-edged as before. The distance was still there, but we knew what it felt like to return to each other's arms. I began to realize I was changing. I became less dependent on waiting for a text. Not because I loved Malcolm less, but because I was learning how to love without losing myself. I signed up for a creative writing elective. My professor remarked that I wrote as if I were searching for a way back to a place that didn't quite exist yet. Malcolm changed too. He was more confident talking about work. Fewer apologies for being busy. More of, "I want this," instead of, "I'm scared." One night, on a video call, Malcolm said, "I talked to my supervisor. They offered me an extension. Another 3 months." Silence. I took a deep breath. "And?" I said no. I looked straight at the screen. "You did." Malcolm nodded. "Because I realized something. I don't want a life where everything fits except the person I love." My chest tightened with emotion. "Malcolm, you didn't have to decide that because of me." "I know," he said, smiling. "I decided it with you in mind. There's a difference." Chicago and the final lesson. Malcolm returned in late May. But peace, as I learned, isn't a fixed state. In late July, I received an email saying I had been selected for a fall semester exchange program in Chicago, a prestigious writing opportunity, exactly what I had dreamed of. I read the email 3 times before telling Malcolm. "Another distance," Malcolm said when I told him. "For hours by train," I said. "Not 3 time zones." Malcolm chuckled softly. "You're getting good at selling it." I took his hand. "I'm scared too, but I don't want to be the one who stays small because I'm afraid to leave." Malcolm was silent for a long time. Then he squeezed my hand. "I don't want to be the reason you don't go, and I don't want to pretend it won't be hard." When I boarded the train to Chicago in late August, Malcolm saw me off at the station.
No tears.
Just a long hug and 2 smiles. Chicago greeted me with wind, cold, honest wind. I lived in a small room near the Loop. The days passed with classes, deadlines, and nights spent writing until late. Malcolm and I called each other every night. Not long, not clingy, just consistent. I wrote more than ever. My writing was no longer about fear or waiting. It was about choice, about the courage to go and the courage to return. My professor told me, "Your writing feels settled, like it knows where it belongs." I thought of Malcolm. The semester flew by. When the train finally pulled back into our campus station, I saw Malcolm standing there. He looked the same, but his hair was a bit longer. When our eyes met, we both smiled, no running, no shouting. Just a whole, long embrace. "Welcome home," Malcolm said. "I'm home," I replied. Place called peace. That evening, we sat on the steps where it all began. "You found what you were looking for?" he asked. I thought for a moment. I found that peace isn't a place I have to stay in. It's something I carry, and something I come back to. Malcolm smiled. The smile that made me realize why, amidst all the chaos, I always knew the way back. 2 smiles, he said. 1 place. I rested my head on his shoulder. We built it. We sat there for a long time. No further plans. No grand promises. Just 2 guys who had once been afraid, once been hurt, once faced the distance. Now sitting side by side, smiling, exactly where they belonged. And I understood that peace isn't when life stops testing you. Peace is when, after everything, you still choose to return, and there is a smile waiting for you. 2 smiles. 1 peaceful place.